Good day everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Julian Narbalde and I am going to deliver a speech about how developing countries can achieve a green economy. Let me start with one of my favorite proverbs. There are various variations, but they all teach the same thing. Though we do not inherit the world from our forefathers, but rather borrow it from our children. The heart of sustainable development is encapsulated in this proverb. We must try to ensure that our children grow up in a world that is, at the absolute least, not worse off than the one we found. Our species has failed to learn this lesson. A recent UNICEF report puts it bluntly. Climate change and other environmental threats threaten 1 billion children. Heat waves, flooding, cyclones, lead and air pollution, and vector-borne diseases are all examples of natural disasters. These tragedies are undermining the complete spectrum of children's rights, from access to clean air, food and water to education, housing, freedom from exploitation, and even their right to survive. As they intensify and worsen, we are living in an increasingly hazardous planet for our children. This is especially true in developing countries when a child's multiple overlapping shocks severely limit their prospects of living a healthy, full life. And when the climate, biodiversity, and pollution issues worsen, this will only worsen. So, how can emerging countries turn things around? How can we recover from the shock of COVID in such a way that our children inherit a planet in better shape than we did? Before I respond, let me state unequivocally that we already know where we need to go. The Sustainable Development Goals provide a roadmap to a bold and beautiful vision of our shared future, a future in which hundreds of millions of people no longer go to bed hungry every night, where poverty no longer affects 1 out of every 10 people, and where everyone has access to high-quality education and lifelong learning opportunities. Even worse than the epidemic, the triple global crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss poses an even bigger existential threat to life on Earth. In the near term, we may recover from the pandemic, but unless we do it in a way that addresses the planetary catastrophe, the Sustainable Development Goals of our prospects of leaving our children the world they deserve will be lost. So, what are our options for recovery? How do we get our bearings and take steps towards a common future? There are 3 components to the answer. First and foremost, we must avoid past development blunders. These are contributing to the triple global crisis in ways that make the Sustainable Development Goals unattainable. Second, we must divert recovery funds away from the sectors, industries, and infrastructure that are causing the most damage. Then finally, we must place nature at the center of our decision making. I'll begin with the first point. The conventional response when faced with problems like poverty, hunger, and unemployment has been to grow more, expand more, build more. Economic growth in particular has been seen as a panacea, a one-size-fits-all cure for all the world's social problems. And there is the truth in this. Massive advances in some parts of the world in areas like poverty reduction, access to electricity, and maternal and child health would have been impossible without economic expansion. And yet, the type of growth we have witnessed in the forms of development enjoyed by high-income countries over the past century have come at a terribly high cost. The infrastructure we have built, roads, buildings, transport, industries, and electricity, account for three-quarters of planet-heating greenhouse gas emissions. Every day that we invest in business as usual and carbon-dependent projects leads us further down the wrong path. And it's the same story for the pollution crisis. The air pollution, chemicals and waste that are destroying human health and well-being are the direct consequence of the economic and social development paths that we have chosen. So this is the first major point that I want to make. It is critical that poor countries avoid past and current failures in recovering from the epidemic, in bringing people out of poverty, starvation, and ill health. Infrastructure that promotes human development and well-being is desperately needed, but we must approach the problem differently than in the past. Today, we have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to do precisely that, to do it right. This is because most of the infrastructure required in 2050 has yet to be constructed. Building it will require trillions of dollars in annual investment, with the majority of it taking place in poorer countries. So, do we get it right this time? To begin with, developing countries must immediately shift their recovery spending away from harmful investments and that fuel their triple planetary crisis. This message is clearly not getting through because more than 80% of the $2.25 trillion in recovery spending is going towards business as usual investments. This is a grave mistake. These investments will lock in the very greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, and biodiversity loss that are undermining human well-being and destroying the ability of nations to achieve the sustainable development goals. They also make little economic sense. We know that green fiscal spending can deliver stronger economic returns than traditional spending alternatives. Investing in energy efficiency and renewables, for example, creates 5 times the number of employment per dollar invested in fossil fuels. And with $31 trillion in energy investment needed between now and 2040, focusing that money toward energy efficiency, building retrofits, smart grids, and renewable energy supply and storage would be a win for the planet, our health, job seekers, and investors. Countries that invest in green transportation, green research and development, green skills initiatives, and natural capital can reap similar rewards. This final point is crucial. Natural capital, or the living environment that nourishes us, must be prioritized in the recovery process, particularly in developing countries. This is because many natural capital projects do not necessitate the types of highly specialized labor that emerging economies frequently lack. These countries also rely heavily on natural-based industries like agriculture and tourism. Therefore, natural-based solutions have the potential to protect their most vital economic sectors. Crop pollination, water filtration, medication, flood and storm protection, disease prevention, food and fuel are just a few of the many benefits that healthy ecosystems provide for humanity. For example, by restoring and conserving these life-sustaining ecosystems through nature-positive food production, hunger can be alleviated, poverty reduced, and equitable employment increase. Natural capital is also crucial in addressing climate change. Member states will convene in Glasgow later this year to debate the Paris Agreement's implementation and ambitious NDCs. Countries must work together to enhance investments in natural infrastructure such as mangroves, coastal wetlands, and forests, which are critical to addressing the climate catastrophe. So without exacerbating the situation or jeopardizing economic growth, I've detailed some of the ways developing countries can recover from the pandemic. But let me be clear, none of this will be achieved without sufficient funding. So we've arrived at a fork in the road The pathways ahead of us are crystal obvious. We can either continue on our current course, plunging us deeper into the triple planetary disaster, and we may also correct our course by realigning our activities with the Sustainable Development Goals vision. I'm clear about what I want, and if given the option, I know which path every single youngsters on the planet would take. So let us take use of this once in a lifetime opportunity to ensure that the world we leave our children is fit for them to live in. So that is all. Thank you.